Welcome everyone to this webinar tonight, where we have the privilege and honor of having Chana Studley here, who lives in Israel, and she can introduce herself in a moment. But I just wanted to say that this webinar is hosted by the Danish organization 3PDK, which is a non-profit organization where it is our commitment to share the teachings of Sydney Banks. We do that mostly in Danish, but we also occasionally invite people from around the world to speak with us. So it's really great to have you here today, Chana. And
Thank you.
I remember knowing about you for years, but I think last year at the London conference was the first time that you and I sort of got to spend some time together and hang out together. Then I was asked to write the foreword of the Danish edition of Painless. I got to read it again in Danish.
Yeah, thank you for doing that, and it's really special to have you write that forward. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you for coming today. And you and I spoke a little beforehand, and you said that you really like to answer questions. So I thought I'd come with one and then let you speak, and then maybe have another one, and we'll see how it goes, and then we'll open it up at some point so everyone can ask questions.
Sounds good.
One of the things that I love about listening to you and also reading your book is that I have a lot of clients who are in a lot of physical pain, and there's not a lot of material. There's not many people speaking about that connection between the mind and the body. And so I'd love to hear from you. What is your experiences, and what did you see around that connection that made you want to write that book that I know has been so popular?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question. I guess originally what prompted me to start, offering my experience and working with people was the fact that my pain went away when I came across the 3 principles. It was so simple. And often people ask me, what did you do to get rid of your pain, and how long did it take to go away? And I can honestly say I have no idea, because I didn't come to the 3 principles to get rid of my pain. I thought that the physical pain I was experiencing was just going to be with me for life. I'd had it for 25 years. So I didn't know it could go away. And I'd been told by plenty of doctors and osteopaths and chiropractors around the world, wherever I went, that because of the injuries I'd received, in my 20s when I went through a lot of trauma, that's just the way my body is. And it was a result of injuries and like allergies and, just things I had to put up with. So when I came across the 3 principles, it was really out of just curiosity to, dive deeper into this amazing understanding. Like, I'd been coaching people for 30 years when I came across this. I'd done all those other modalities we've all heard of, I tried everything, I lived in Southern California for a long time. So there was plenty to be doing there, like meditations and, self-realization temple and all that stuff. And everything worked for a while. Like, all the medications I tried for my physical stuff worked for a while. Everything kind of like gave you some benefit, and then it would wear off, or then I'd get bored with it, or, whatever it was. So when I first heard Sydney Banks speak, it was like I found a vocabulary for what I'd suspected for a long time. I knew the problem was in my thinking. I just thought you had to do something about your thinking. So that was, I think, my real first insight. And I fell in love with it immediately. And, I went to London to do the One Thought program with Aaron Turner. And at the end of the course, I remember sitting in this chair, sitting at my computer here, and first of all, I noticed that I didn't have any pain, and I hadn't had any pain for 6 months, which was like the length of the course. And I started thinking, when did I last have a flare up? And it was literally since I had that very first insight. And I thought, really? Could that be? And And I kind of checked in with my back, and I'm thinking, I actually feel stronger now than I did when, than since I've been a teenager. I'd been paralyzed. I'd had IBS. I'd had allergies, eczema, asthma, all kinds of physical things, sciatica pain, rushed to the hospital, couldn't move my legs. And it had all gone, which was absolutely fascinating to me and amazing. I'm very grateful. And so I just got curious and started researching and understanding it. And fast forward, what I see now is that all of those physical issues I was having, they weren't as a result of my injuries, because what I learned is that all injuries heal. And all injuries heal within 4 to 6 weeks. So why was I still having pain 25 years later? Why did I have allergies for 50 years? And I know now is because my body was screaming at me. My body was screaming at me to slow down. And because I didn't understand that, and I'm not a doctor, and all the doctors were telling me other things, I never knew that. And now it seems to me so obvious, and especially now working with a lot of people with physical issues, I only have to ask them a few questions. And I've noticed, and this is a generalization, but most people I've met with some kind of chronic physical issue, including myself, have a kind of perfectionist thinking, right? And something as simple as wanting everything to be right can actually send danger messages to the brain, and then our brain thinks that we're not safe, and then it puts us into the fight or flight response. And all of that is a thought created experience. And if I can't understand that message in my mind, then my body is going to let me know. Now, not everybody's body works that way. There's just some of us, our bodies, and I think it's probably becoming more and more people, our bodies are letting us know that we've gotten caught up in our thinking, and that stress response is being overactivated. And then I just want to tell a quick story about the perfectionist thing. A few months ago, I was walking in the city center, and you know how when you're in a parking lot, they put the white lines on the tarmac, to show you where to park your car. And I was walking through, and you know how there's always that idiot who parks way too close to the white line, and then the next person can't park there, or they ding their car when they open, or have to get out the passenger side. And I'm thinking, that's so selfish. Like, why can't they just take another minute to park straight? And then I suddenly thought, it's got nothing to do with me. In fact, I don't even have a car right now because I live in the middle of Jerusalem. There's nowhere to park. And it just made me laugh so much, because my thinking was like that all the time, constantly supervising, monitoring, checking what was wrong, what wasn't right, what could be better. And I see now that all that kind of thinking was putting my brain and my body into survival mode. And so that's hence all the physical issues over the years that we're trying to get my attention to slow down. So that's kind of how I see it now, and being able to share that with other people, and them going like, oh yeah, watching the light bulb come on for other people is such a privilege. So yeah, it's been an amazing experience.
Mm-hmm. It's so normal, isn't it? This mind that's so active, and it's constantly judging, evaluating, analyzing, like other people's business.
Yeah.
As you said. And
Yeah.
working with people, I mean, I've been working with people for almost 30 years, and especially the past 12 years with the principles, I also see this connection between pain and slowing down. Sometimes it's like the body is saying, if you won't listen, you will feel.
Yeah.
And so seeing that's like your body's screaming at you. But it's not telling you you're a bad human being, or you did something horrible in a past life, or it's simply saying you're overactive.
Yeah.
And I want you to slow down and take care of yourself. It's often in my work, it's that simple. But could you go back to, what did you hear and what Sid said originally, that I'm sure that through Aaron's program that became more obvious, but can you remember the original insights you had around that connection?
It's hard to remember the original like having that original insight, but I knew the effect of it was that I didn't have to do anything, all that busy work anymore to correct my thinking. Because I, you know, coming from all those kind of creative writing and meditation kind of modalities, and I was actually, I'm a certified Enneagram life coach. I have a diploma in Enneagram diagnostics, you know. And the moment I heard Sid speak, I like, all that just dropped. I realized I didn't need all that stuff anymore, because if you see that thought is always moving, if it's constantly moving, then that's why there's nothing to do. And my favorite analogy with that is, like, if you think of thoughts like trains going through a station, it's kind of like dragging the train back into the station to work out how to make it leave. Well, it already left, right? So all those techniques I was doing and sharing with my clients at the time were actually messing with the system. And then the first real insight I physically remember having was Charles Rosenblatt, who's, you know, one of the organizers of the London conference. His daughter Shifra used to live here. When I first came around, she was teaching classes here, and she's I'm old enough to be her mother, but she's, because she grew up with the Tre Principles, she's just naturally a brilliant teacher. She just really gracious and wonderful teacher. And I think she could just tell I was getting it, so she encouraged me to come, you know, and then soon we started doing events together. And I remember being at one of her women's groups, and there was a woman there who was talking about a problem at home, like in her relationship. And I was very new to the principles at the time, and I remember, because I was older and I was, you know, I've been coaching for a long time, so I thought I could give some help here. So I said to her, you know, what I've learned to do is ignore that kind of thinking. And Shifra, in her very sweet English way, said, well, you see, that worked for Chana, or you could just do nothing. And I'm thinking, that's what I said, ignore it. And why is she criticizing me in front of other people? And then I'm up in my head, I probably didn't catch anything of the rest of that, judging her like what are they talking about? And it was literally 6 weeks later, I was actually staying with Shal and Hannah to start the One Thought course. And I'm sitting there in their kitchen, and they're all asleep. I'm up early to go, you know, on a Sunday morning to go across the city to meet Aaron. And I'm eating my cereal, and I suddenly thought, oh, ignoring your thoughts is doing something. And it was like, boom, it was like, it hit me. It was so clear that it really kind of confirmed that there's nothing, not that there's nothing to do, that's why there's nothing to do, because it's spiritual energy moving through all the time. And you don't have to help spiritual energy. It's doing its thing. And the more of an observer I can become of that, then the less it has to affect me. I was going to say infect me, but that, yeah, it's probably infect, like contaminate, like Sid's words were like contaminate, right? So the less contaminated my thinking was, the more I was able to see it's flowing. And a quote I really love, and I can't remember if it's Plato or Aristotle or one of those Greek guys. Anyway, he said, like, a man cannot step in the same river twice, right? So if I think of my thought life like a stream, like a river, I might even revisit some old memories or some old thoughts, but it's always moving through, always fresh and new. And depending on my state of mind, my mood, that's how I'm going to experience it. And to tie that in with the physical thing, I've really started seeing how anxiety feels in the body. And when you can identify that and become aware of it, it's like I can see the steam train coming now, and it can step out the way. I don't have to, you know, get run over by it like I used to. And I was coaching one of my neighbors, his 12-year-old son. The school wants to medicate him. The school wants to, you know, the ADHD thing is, you know, like, it's rampant here, and the teachers just want to, you know, give everybody a diagnosis. And so the parents wanted me to, you know, work with him a little bit just to see if we could slow him down, you know. And I was asking him, I said, in the middle of the day when you have a break at school, what are you feeling in your body? And he got what I was pointing at. He said, my tummy rumbles. I'm like, yeah, your tummy rumbles, right? And then let's say you're playing football and you're running around, you get hot. Then what happens? He says, well, I sweat. I said, yeah. So we were going through all these things that the body naturally does to give us messages, to tell us we're hungry, so we need to eat, to we're sweating, so cool down. You know, if your eyelids get heavy, it means you're tired. And if your tummy is rumbling, it doesn't mean you're dying. You know, if you're sweating, it doesn't mean you're leaking, right? So, right. And if your eyelids are heavy, it doesn't mean you need surgery. They're just the beautiful way we're like divinely engineered to give us information to help us take care of ourselves. And so I asked him, what does it feel like when you get speeded up, you know, when the teacher is, you know, on your telling you off, right? He went like this. He said, it feels tight here. He said, that's your body letting you know we need to slow down. And he's like, oh. Now, I have no idea if he got it, but I think I got more out of that conversation than he did. But, you know, it just like learning to see how the wisdom of the body and the wisdom of the mind. And actually, this was an insight I got when I was writing Painless, was, you know, often in the pain management world and the medical world, we're told how the body has incredible wisdom to heal itself, you know, like a fracture, a cut, an infection. And I suddenly thought, if the same divine mind that created my body created that with intelligence, why wouldn't it create my mind with its ability to heal itself? Well, it did, right? And then, I mean, that's what, you know, we're all doing here, is learning how that system works. And you know, the more aware I become of how my body kind of talks to me. And I'm not the kind of person who, you know, I'm not sensitive to certain foods or anything like that. I'm really not that in touch with my body, other than when it tries to wake me up. And I've learned to recognize those signals. And you know, and so, you know, even sharing it with a child now, I've like learning a language and examples and metaphors to explain that. So yeah, long answer to your question. Lots of insights along the way that have kind of developed and deepened, and you know, and I think the main one is just seeing that I don't actually have to do anything because it's always moving. I mean, I think that's the main one. Yeah.
I love what you said about I call it sometimes just biofeedback,
Yeah.
like, or body feedback. And one of the things that I notice in the clients that I work with pain is that they misinterpret the body signal. Means something other than slow down. So for instance, with one woman I'm working with, she says, well, I'm in pain, so I should work out some more. I should push myself to walk. I'm like, I don't think that's what your body's telling you. I think it's telling you the opposite. And so she was like, really? I said, well, try it and see how it responds. And so she didn't push herself, and she's like, oh, I was in no pain for 2 days. And then something else came up. But that misinterpretation of the feedback.
Yeah.
Could you say something more about that? And maybe you have other examples from other clients?
Yeah. The example I often give people when we're talking about that is, I always say to them, imagine there was somebody else here, you know, on the call or in the room with us, who is shaking, breathing fast, their heart is pumping, you know, like their hands are sweating. What would you say has just happened to them? And without fail, everybody always says they've had a trauma, they've had a shock, you know, maybe an accident, something negative. And I say, okay, but what if I told you they just got off the roller coaster at the local fun park? Yay, let's do it again, right? The excitement and stress are actually the same physical reaction, physiologically. The same thing's happening. Blood pressure's gone up, heart is pounding, breathing fast, hand shaking. And we innocently interpret that as a negative thing, as a problem. Now, I'm not saying everything is exciting, you know, but when you learn to, like Sid said, not be frightened by those experiences, we can pause enough to think about how we're interpreting them. Maybe it isn't, maybe I don't have to go into panic right now. Maybe it's going to be okay. Maybe, and when our thinking slows down, and I think it kind of like pops us up to a better level of consciousness, we usually know what to do. common sense kicks in, which I personally think common sense is a highly underrated virtue these days. So common sense kicks in, and then we just get guided. And if you are in an emergency, you will be guided to find the exit or call the emergency number. I did a course with a medical doctor, a mind-body medicine medical doctor once, and he called it the mom rule. He was American, so he'd say mom, right? The mom rule. If you went to your mom, and obviously we're talking about an idealistic mom here, but if you went to your mom with a boo-boo, with a cut, with a something wrong, what would she do? Would she give you a Band-Aid? Would she take you to the emergency room? Would she put you to bed? And I kind of thought about that, and yeah, that's common sense, right? That's wisdom, following that wisdom. And it's easier, I found, to follow that wisdom when my mind's a bit clearer. So interpreting, those physical issues in a way that doesn't have fear and panic behind them gives us an opportunity to heal the nervous system much quicker. And I found with clients, some people can get it like that. I even had a guy sitting on my sofa one time. He lived in Tel Aviv, and he'd done some mentoring with George Pansky, but he'd had a surgery on his shoulder, and he wanted to get back to his yoga classes, and he couldn't rotate his arms properly. And of course the surgeon has said, well, you need to have another surgery, which is usually their answer. And then he came to buy a copy of my book, and we just sat and started chatting. And then he went like that, and I was like, what is it? He goes, oh my gosh. And he was able to move his arm. Now that's pretty freakishly, a miracle on the spot. It doesn't always happen that way. And it was, and I've seen that a couple of times where people have just, their muscles have just relaxed and then can move better. But what I've also found is, for some reason, and I really don't know why, but people with fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue, it seems to take a lot longer. I have one client who we started working together right at the beginning of when I was doing this, and she was in Germany, and she had fibromyalgia probably for about 5 years already. In fact, she was in such a bad way that when we had our first Zoom session, she could not sit still long enough for the Zoom. She had to move around, she had to lie down. She told me that her husband couldn't give her a hug. It was too painful. She couldn't go to a restaurant and sit, long enough to eat a meal in a restaurant. It was pretty bad. And she'd gone to all the doctors and tried the supplements. She'd even trained in some kind of meditation technique herself. And we had some sessions. I have a program where she went through that with me. And about a month after she finished, and by the way, she fell in love with the principles. She's probably heard and read everything Sid has ever done, more than probably what I have. She's actually translated a lot of his stuff into German, and a lot of other Tre Principles stuff she's working on. She's translated my books, and yet her pain was still there. But what was amazing was she stopped being so concerned with it. She stopped being so focused on it. And just a month after we worked together, she had this dream of going to Jamaica for a vacation. And she flew from Cologne, Germany to Miami, and then out to Jamaica. Now, I think anybody would be tired after that flight, right? And she did it. And she spent 3 weeks in Jamaica and had this dream vacation, just relaxing and reading. And then she came back. And it's been a couple of years now, and her pain has gotten less and less and less. But she never talks about it anymore. Like occasionally we're still in touch, and occasionally I'll say to her, how are you feeling? She's, oh, fine. She said, she runs every day now. She works in her garden. At first she would have to rest after a run. She doesn't have to do that now. She's working in her garden and enjoying the most amazing life. And even though she still has some, muscle soreness, it's not a big deal anymore to her. It's just, she's lost interest in it, which is amazing, I think. So sometimes people have physical issues that maybe are not going to go away, like something organic, or, something that they have to deal with. But I know that there's the physical pain, and then there's the thinking about it. And that's what's actually creating the experience. And that's what we have, what we're able to understand and then not suffer from that. And we can all get caught up. I know I do. And occasionally I might even get a twinge, but I just know now not to feed it or fight it. And it goes away. So, you know, there's a whole range of experiences of how people, you know, kind of respond to this. Some people do not get it at all. And in fact, I just thought of one story. Bill Pettit referred a client to me one time, a guy in New York. And he, probably in the first 10 minutes of our first session, he must have said to me, I need to be 100% pain-free. He must have said that like 10 times. When will I be 100% pain-free? How did you get 100% pain-free? What does it take? And I said, okay, stop. I said, I'm feeling the pressure. Like, you know, I'm sure you are. And I said to him, I don't know that anybody can promise you 100% pain-free. I feel great and I'm not 100% pain-free. You know, we all get sick or have a twinge or, you know, something happens, you know. It's just part of being a human being. And I said, I don't know any doctor who can promise you that either. I said, why don't we take the idea that's causing a lot of pressure right now, put it on the shelf, and then we'll come back to it later. And trust me, I want your pain to go away. You know, it's not that I don't want that, but the pressure of needing the 100% part is probably going to stop that happening. That's that perfectionist thing, right? And so we had a session and had a very similar conversation to talking about the things that we're sharing. And at the end of the session, I kind of checked in with him to see how he was doing. And he said, you know what? He said, you know, at the beginning, when you said, put that idea on the shelf, he said, that blew my mind. He said, I had no idea you could stop thinking a thought once you're thinking that thought. And I said to him, I said, so you mean I didn't need to have wasted my time talking for the last hour? And he said, no, I was able to hear what you were saying because I'd let go of that idea. And then we talked about the fact that there actually is no shelf, right? Just to be clear, there is no shelf, right? That was just a metaphor. And he started to get it. And as he slowed down, I can't even remember what his pain issue was now, but he was going so fast that it was keeping his nervous system revved up. And as he slowed down, whatever it was, you know, started to heal and melt away and get better. So yeah, there's a couple of client stories for you.
And they're so similar to my client stories too. There's almost 100% of the time a pressure that the person is putting on themselves, whether it's a perfectionist at work or at home or anything. I talked about a year ago for the Danish community where I spoke about pain and then I spoke about suffering, just like you mentioned before. We can't always get out of the pain. There can be many reasons, and pain is a good thing for many reasons.
Yeah.
The suffering about it. And then we take that pressure off. It's like relieving a ball that's been, you know, over extended and it's like relieves. And so now I allow my body to more space, slowing down and allowing it to heal.
Yeah.
So I just see so much of a connection there that the more we can relax into our being, we give our body optimal conditions to heal itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I was working with a woman earlier today, just as an example, who it's a performer, and before she is going out to perform, her heart is pounding, and you know, sweaty hands, and she feels her throat go and all of that. And I said, well, that doesn't mean that you're going to fail. It doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean that you're a type something on the Enneagram.
Right.
It means that you're thinking something about being judged. Something is on the line here. And then as you think that, you're going to feel it. And then when you feel it, you think that you're feeling truth.
Yeah.
Instead of knowing that you're feeling your thinking. There's something about that and pain that we misinterpret the symptoms so often.
Yeah. Yeah. You just made me think, I often use the analogy of a magic trick to try and explain the illusion part of this, because like imagine, you know, a little kid going to a magic show, like an old-fashioned, you know, magician with the top hat and everything, and and he pulls the rabbit out of the hat, you know, the old-fashioned trick, and a little kid's going to go, wow, mom, did you see that? How do you do that? Like, and a little kid is going to be fooled by the trick. But as an adult, you can probably guess there's probably maybe a hole in the hat, maybe there's a cage under the table, right? You might not know exactly how he did it, but you know it's a trick, and so you're not fooled by it. Like when I know that my thinking is just an illusion, it's just a trick, and and even the pain is, like you said, pain is there to serve a purpose. It's to protect us, to keep us safe. Then, and it's actually in the brain, it's not actually in the body. I talk about special effects and illusions, right? Pain is a fascinating one when it comes to that. Then I don't have to fall for the trick. And then I always take it a little bit further and say, you know, the old-fashioned trick they used to do of sawing a woman in half, right? Now, how come nobody's calling the police? Right? How come nobody's screaming? I mean, if a man went near a woman with a massive big knife, like a big saw, you know, we'd be calling the police, we'd be screaming, there'd be someone rushing the stage to, like, you know, try and get him away, right? But we're all sitting in our theater seats watching, going, oh, wow. And so I always ask my clients that, why are you not panicking? Why are you not doing anything about it? And it's because of the context. When you know you're watching a show, like, you might not quite know how they do it. I actually Googled it. I found out that there's actually two women, they're short, and one woman's in one box and one woman's in the other box. One's wiggling her head, one's wiggling her toes. And otherwise there would be blood and, you know, someone's being arrested, right? So because we know it's a trick, we don't panic and we don't fall for it. And that's, I think, what's happened. That's another major insight with my thinking, is when I know it's not reliable, you know, I learned that pain is an unreliable indicator of the state of my body, and thinking is an unreliable narrator of the state of my mind. And you put those two together, and that could, I just thought you could actually get neurotic about that. But what I know now is that you combine that with an understanding that we're safe and that we're taken care of, and that there's a divine loving kindness behind the system, then knowing that you're going to be taken care of, it's okay to step back from that thinking or step back from that pain and just reflect on, you know, maybe I just got caught up for a minute, you know, maybe that's what happened. And it's amazing how we can just watch it flow through when that happens, not fall for the illusion. Yeah.
So I'm hearing, you know, the pain is a way of our body sharing information with us that we need to listen to, and that's not always something we can ignore. It's something that can be important to us to listen to. Yeah. But what happens is that we create suffering around it because we don't like the feeling.
Right.
So then now we start to suffer, and the suffering is actually increasing the pain because it's creating a sort of internal pressure.
Yeah.
Rather than seeing it as, okay, my body is in pain. What does it need most of me? Well, maybe it needs me to relax. Maybe it needs for me to be less perfectionistic. Maybe it needs for me to simply let it do what it does.
Yeah.
There's this intelligence behind life that knows how to heal. But am I giving my body enough space to heal?
Yeah.
So I'm hearing you say that.
Yeah, it just reminded me, I had pneumonia last November, which when I was a kid, people died of pneumonia. You know, it's like, I mean, obviously it was, I think they call it walking pneumonia because I wasn't in the hospital. I was just at home, and I'd been coughing for about 3 weeks. And, you know, that coughing's so bad, you expect to see your lungs on the floor. You know, it's like, it was so bad. And so eventually I went to the doctor, and he, you know, did some tests and then sent me for an x-ray, and he called me that afternoon. He says, no, you've got pneumonia. And, you know, got me some antibiotics. And that night I had such a fever. I remember kind of, you know, when you have fever and you kind of go in and out of consciousness, and I was in bed with all the covers on. I think I had a hoodie on, maybe I had a hat. you know, when you're freezing and yet you've got all these covers on. And I remember coming to consciousness a little bit, and my whole body was shaking violently. And I suddenly became aware of how tight I was holding myself, because it's a very unpleasant experience, yeah. And there was such wisdom came into my head and just said, breathe slowly and relax. And in the middle of this huge fever, I was able to like observe it. It was really weird, actually. It was quite a strange experience to kind of like the eye in the middle of the storm kind of thing, you know, in the middle of the hurricane. And my body was still shaking and still, you know, dealing with the fever, but it was doing its thing. And the antibiotics were helping. And I got better in just a few days. And I remember talking to Dr. Bill Pettit about that. And he told me that antibiotics will only work as well as your state of mind. And I thought, what? You know, I thought antibiotics are the chemicals that you take them, you get, you know, they do their job, you get better. He said, no, he said, even doctors know that. And then I suddenly thought about it, you know, like, you know, how some people have to take one antibiotic and then they have to take another and they have to take another, because when the body's in survival mode, when it's stressed, it can't make use of that healing system. And so I was so grateful that I got well pretty quickly once I got the medication and was back, you know, breathing well and, you know, no lasting effects, and it was over and done with. But it was quite a very almost like out of body experience, like being just catching myself, holding myself so tightly because of the experience, and then just letting go, and then the body just doing what it needed to do. You know, it's quite, I don't want to go through it again, but you know, but it was a fascinating experience. Yeah.
Common sense really kicks in when we, don't we?
Yeah.
When we don't misinterpret, when we see through the magic trick, we're able to listen to our wisdom, which guides us to do what we need to do.
Yeah.
So should we invite some questions from people?
Yeah. Yeah, please.
Also, please, you can raise your little digital hand, which is down in the reactions button, and then we can see who it is. Anyone who have any questions?
Everybody's in perfect health, right?
No pain, everything.
Yeah, great.
We are Danish, after all, the happiest on the planet, so.
Danish people never get sick.
No pain.
Nice.
Know me.
Just moving through my house. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I just wondered, you spoke something about, I don't remember what you said, but a question arose in my head about if you experience that your clients or people you speak with, they create pain, so to speak, to avoid living life because they are afraid of, you know, just going out there and feeling free and being part of it all.
So are you asking me if that's the case, if I see that to be true?
Yeah, it was just a random thought that kind of took my mind wandering for a while. If it's, you know, to preserve, to keep tight in your life, if you see that some people create pain to keep back in life, so to speak. Does it make sense?
Yeah, I understand the question. Yeah, I'm just thinking, I don't think I mean, I'm sure there is somebody in history who's done that, you know. I mean, there's human beings are quite creative in how they, you know, operate in the world. And I know that when I was a teenager, like I had terrible allergies when I was a kid. Well, for 50 years I had terrible allergies. chronic hay fever, eyes burning, can't breathe. And it got me out of a lot of things in school.
Yeah.
All I had to do was just like touch my eyes a little bit and they could make them swell up and go red and sore and like, I can't breathe, which got me out of school plays. It got me out of doing sports, anything I didn't want to do. It's raining. Oh, I don't want to do, not going to run out in the field today. So yeah, I can't breathe. So, so for sure, I might have, brought it on, when it was convenient. But what you're talking about is more of, I guess, more of an unconscious thing. Yeah. So it's probably quite possible. I mean, I remember, like, I also had terrible urine infections when I was little. And my mom was, my mother was actually a children's nurse. So she was very, we only went to the hospital if you're dying, that kind of thing. Like I had to go to school, even though my eyes were streaming and I couldn't breathe, and other kids at school would get, 3 days off for having a cold. I never got any days off for my allergies because it's just allergies. Off you go. Right. So my mother was pretty tough. And when I got the urine infections, she had to take me to the doctor, and I got to, I don't know if I was about getting to spend time with her or getting time off school. I don't know, because I don't know that I was consciously bringing them on, but there were some benefits to it, for sure. And I'm sure there are people where that could be, but I tend not to go down that path because it feels very much like blame. And, because in fact, I've deliberately stayed away from like talking about cancer, for example, because I don't want anybody to feel that it's their fault, because fault is just going to bring more stressful thinking. It is stressful thinking. And I wouldn't want to go down that path. Now, does stressful thinking bring on cancer? I don't know. It's quite possible for some people, I guess. But I've actually stayed away from analyzing what pain, when, how, and the cause of it. Sometimes it's obvious with some people because, like, let's say they're doing a big presentation tomorrow and they get a stomachache the night before. Sometimes it can be that obvious, right? But are they doing it on purpose? I don't know. I mean, I think it's more an unconscious thing that the stress, is causing that. But I don't know if this is connected, but this just came into my head. I remember the urine infections I had went away when I was a teenager, and then they came back for a while in my 30s when I was in Los Angeles. And I went, I just had regular health insurance like they have in America, and my doctor his offices happened to be in Beverly Hills, and he was next to the hospital. So he said, let's do a test. We can do it now, right? If you're free. I'm like, sure, we'll do it now. So, showed me into his surgery, into the hospital. And I don't know how they do it now, but back then they would have to put an IV in your arm and they would inject a dye. And then they take like a zillion x-rays to watch the dye go through your kidneys and, or your system. And the nurse put the IV in my arm, and then she went away to see if the x-ray machine was ready or something. And I'm in a hospital gown now. And she came back in the room and I was like, she goes, are you okay? And I'm like, yeah, I'll be okay. And I suddenly thought, what am I doing? I was fine when I walked in. I didn't even have an infection at the time, right? And I thought, you put me an IV in my arm and put me in a hospital gown, and I start acting like a sick person, and I was getting all weak and bent over, and I'm like, yeah, can you help me off the table? And I thought, snap out of it. It was like, I caught myself. This is like way back, before the principles. And actually, just a funny ending to that story, when I went back to the doctor for the results, the doctor was looking at my x-rays and he said, gosh, I don't know how to tell you this, which is not something you want to hear from a doctor, right? And I'm like, what? He goes, you've got 4 kidneys. And I'm like, what? I'm like, is that good or bad? He said, well, they work, so I guess it doesn't matter. Right? So I have 4 kidneys. I think there's what they call secondary benefit, in terms of being sick, that, you can get attention, it can get you out of things. But I think for most people, it's an innocent misunderstanding. you know, we get stressed about something and our body starts to try and get our attention if we don't understand, you know, the thinking part of it. And for some people it's migraines. I actually asked a doctor one time, why is it some people get migraines and other people get stomach problems? Some people get back problems and some people get dizziness, you know, or fertility problems. And he said, we don't know. And I've actually come to the place now where I don't actually pay much attention to the specifics of someone's physical issue, because that's not where the solution is. You know, people call me and they say, have you worked with people with plantar fasciitis? And I'm like, quick, Google that. What is it? Oh yeah, it's foot pain. And I never want to dismiss someone's suffering and pain, but it's a distraction. What we want to get to is understanding how experience is created and how that works. And then whatever people are up to, innocently or consciously, in a right mind, that's gonna melt away. Yeah.
Thank you. It's so beautiful how you turn it upside down and way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Turn it upside down. Absolutely. Yeah, pleasure.
So we have a question from the chat. Somebody's asking if you could talk a little bit more about experiences with clients who have chronic fatigue. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll just say something about, but
yeah. I think chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia are very similar. In fact, I heard a doctor one time described it this way. He said your average person's nervous system, he said, imagine it like the strings of a guitar, right? You pluck the strings, there's a vibration, we get a sensation. You know, that's how a average person, you know, experiences sensations in their body. He said, but people with chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia, he said, it's like their nervous system is like an electric guitar. And it's an electric guitar that's been plugged in. And you plug an electric guitar into an amplifier because it amplifies the sound, right? So as you turn up the volume on an amplifier, the sound gets bigger and bigger. And he said that's what it's like with people with these conditions, is their nervous system is getting more and more sensitized. So even the simplest thing like a touch or having to walk from here to there is absolutely exhausting, is absolutely painful. And I remember Bill teaching me that he said anybody in a low state of mind is going to feel pain at a much more intense level, the same kind of pain, than someone who's in a better state of mind. Same pain. I mean, as if you probably check how two people can experience pain the same, but your state of mind, you can just tell it in yourself. And like an example I often use is if you stub your toe on the kitchen table and when you're sick, it's going to be, who put that table there? You know, but if you stub your toe on the way to, you know, get the pizza that just arrived, then you probably don't notice it for very long because you're eating the pizza and watching the movie. You've forgotten about it. Same tissue damage, different experience. So when I've worked with people with chronic fatigue, in fact, I remember this man I worked with, he was here locally, and it was really a fascinating experience. He's in full-time student, a mature student, and he's learning all day long, and he's in a religious school. So there's you know, like he put such pressure on himself to be learning. You know, it's like a waste of time if he's not learning all the time, to the point where he was walking down the street with a book. And if he had to be the one to look after his kids, he's got a book in one hand and, you know, and like just making sure the kids aren't killing themselves with the other hand, you know. And he was so exhausted that when he would come and talk to me, he was kind of going like this, you know, like he was even struggling to keep his eyes open while we were talking. And we talked about this, and I said to him, I asked him a question. I said, do you think, because he's a religious guy, so I was saying to him, I said, do you think God wants you to be sick in order to study and learn so much? And he went, no. I said, right, so if you were to say to your teacher that you were so ill that you can't even, you know, look after your children well now, it's all on your wife, in order to learn, what would you think your teacher would say to you? He said, he'd tell me to cut it out. I said, right. And I said, and if a younger guy came to you and said, I'm so exhausted, you'd tell him to cut it out, right? And he started having insights into seeing how his, again, a perfectionist thinking, like he had to do it perfectly, that was exhausting him. And, it's actually exhausting being perfect all the time, right? And then about a month later, after we'd had a few sessions, he messaged me and he said, "You're going to laugh." I said, "Okay." He said, "My wife and kids went away for the weekend and all my symptoms went away." And now we were both very clear that getting rid of his wife and kids is not the solution, right? But what he saw was that when they weren't around, the pressure to be perfect, the pressure to control and manage his time, doing everything, it disappeared. The external thing disappeared. And so his thinking about it relaxed. And he had no symptoms. And then when they came back, he started getting exhausted again. So after that, he started to see a lot of connections between his old ideas, how he was, he'd kind of concocted this thought life that was like pressure, like we were talking about just now, like it's incredible pressure. And that is exhausting. And he started getting better. I saw him out with his wife and kids recently. And, he's walking and smiling and waving and, he's doing so much better. So, I think it's really about the nervous system gets so sensitized and like hypervigilance, even, to be perfect, to not make a mistake, to do it right, all that kind of stuff. And as he saw through those old ideas, he just naturally got his energy back. It was incredible. Yeah. Great question. Thank you.
It's an amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
There's another question here, and I think it'll probably be the last one for this evening.
Mm-hmm.
It says, you have experiences where people have gotten completely pain-free after seeing this understanding, even though they have a chronic diagnosis from doctors? And if you do, could you share a story like that?
Yeah, I mean, the first one that comes to mind was actually happened at the London conference. So this was it was before COVID. It's funny, like everything's before COVID and after COVID now. Like when I was a kid, everything was before the war and after the war, so now it's before and after COVID. So it was before COVID, probably the last live conference before then. And let's see. Oh yeah, so I was still helping Julian run the conference at the time. And so I was by the front desk when everybody's coming in and you're welcoming everybody and giving them their tags and everything. And a woman, I could see her walking towards me, and she had a walking stick and she was kind of hobbling. And to me, it was that very familiar back pain kind of hobble, slightly bent forward, slightly sideways, just moving your lower body is really painful. And she came up to me and she said, I forgot my pillow. Like I always sit on a pillow. I've forgotten it. And I cannot sit in those conference room chairs 3 days. Can you help me? And I'm like, I said, I get it. I don't know. I know there's some sofas in the back of the room, but we can't really move them around each, breakout session, but you're welcome to sit in the sofas, in the big room. And then I thought, I'll take a chance and I'll just talk to her, because it was before I written the book and I was just still like learning about this stuff myself. And I said, I had terrible back pain. I used to have sciatica shooting down my legs. I used to describe myself as Audrey Hepburn on one side and Marilyn Monroe on the other side. I'd be so twisted out of shape when I had this pain. And I could see her going, yeah, that's me. And she told me that she was about to have surgery. She was about to have what they call a TENS machine implanted in her spine. A TENS machine it's like a little box, and I think the theory is it interrupts the message from the nerves. It's like it kind of stops the pain message getting through. and she was booked to have this surgery in I don't know, a couple of months' time. And so we talked a little, we literally talked for 5 minutes because I had a walkie-talkie thing in my ear and I was called off to go and do something, and, and that was the end of it. And then the next day, like the second day of the conference, I was walking through the area where the coffee and the bookstall are. And now I won't say she was running, but she was hurrying towards me, and her walking stick was dangling from, she had like a rubber band around her wrist, and she's like, Hannah, I want to tell you something. I was like, what? She said, my pain is going away. Now, admittedly, she knew a little bit about the principles, obviously, because she's at a Tre Principles conference. But I think she'd never made the connection with the physical stuff before. And she'd sat in, several sessions that morning, and click, 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 all these light bulbs are going off. And she's like, I want to tell you, like, my pain. And I think at that time it was about 80% gone after one day, after a 5-minute conversation. Now, the next day, I wanted to find her because this was like fascinating. And I remember, like, the whole conference the next day, I was searching for her. And I found her in having coffee with a friend. And I said, how are you feeling? She's, I'm great. She was like 95% pain-free, on the third day. And I got her email because I wanted to stay in touch with her and just see what was happening. And I only ever heard from her one time, which kind of surprised me because I thought I'd be her best friend now because, of what we shared. But she emailed me one time and she confirmed that, I think it was a month later, she was still 95% pain-free. And I'm guessing that she canceled the surgery. I don't know for sure because she never replied after that. But yeah, so that's my favorite story about, like a pretty wham bam, situation where, insight really can be that powerful. Yeah.
It's amazing the miracles that can happen when we start something.
Yeah.
Well, it's been absolutely wonderful, and there's some great comments in the comment box, people saying thank you and great metaphors, and I want to thank you also from the community that you came today. And I want to let everyone know that the book is now translated into Danish. It's called Smerte. And it can be bought we have a 3P shop called Tre Butikken, and it can be bought there. And I hope that you read it. And also this webinar will be posted on the 3PDK YouTube channel, so it can be watched again. And I'm sure it will be. So I just want to say thank you so much for everything, and we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks for coming.
Okay.
Soon.
Bye.
Bye.